Giganotosaurus was bigger than T-Rex, older than T-Rex, and by every measurement paleontologists have been able to take from the ground, more dangerous in a stand-up fight. And almost nobody in America knows its name. That's the first strange thing about this animal. The second is what an auto mechanic found in the Patagonian desert in 1993, half buried, sticking out of a hillside like the world was trying to hand him a secret. His name was Ruben Carolini. He hunted fossils on the weekends. He wasn't a paleontologist. He was just a guy with a good eye who liked walking dry riverbeds outside the town of Villa El Chocon in Argentina. What he pulled out of that rock rewrote the top of the food chain. Before we go further, one thing needs to be clear. When Americans think of the biggest, meanest predator that ever walked the earth, the reflex answer is Tyrannosaurus rex. Jurassic Park cemented it. Every museum in the country builds its main hall around it. Every kid learns its name before they learn the word paleontologist. T-Rex has been the default apex predator in the public imagination for over 100 years. Giganotosaurus, pronounced Giganotosaurus, was longer. Some estimates put it heavier, and it lived about 30 million years before T-Rex was even a rumor in the fossil record. This is the story of a killer that ruled its part of the world so completely that when the first bones came out of the ground, the paleontologists working on them thought they had made a mistake with the measurements. They hadn't. Let's start with the size, because the size is the part everyone wants first. Giganotosaurus measured about 42 to 43 feet from the tip of its snout to the end of its tail. T-Rex, for comparison, topped out around 40 feet. That's a difference of maybe 2 or 3 feet, which doesn't sound like much until you remember we are talking about two of the largest land predators that ever existed, and one of them was consistently the bigger one. Weight estimates run between 8 and 14 tons, depending on which study you read. The most cited number sits around 8 to 9 tons, which puts it right in T-Rex territory and possibly a little heavier. To picture that, imagine the biggest T-Rex skeleton you've ever seen at a museum. Now add about a Ford F-150's worth of length onto the tail. That's Giganotosaurus. Longer than a school bus, taller at the hip than most SUVs are tall at the roof. And it wasn't a slow tank. Bone structure and computer modeling suggest it could reach around 20 to 30 miles per hour in short bursts. Faster than a horse, faster than you can pedal a bike, fast enough that if it decided you were dinner, the debate was already over. But raw size and speed aren't what make Giganotosaurus terrifying. Plenty of prehistoric animals were big, plenty were fast. What separates this predator from the rest is what its skull is built for. The skull alone was about 6 feet long. That's the length of an average American man laid flat on a table. 6 feet of bone, muscle, and teeth, designed for one specific job. And that job wasn't crushing. Now we come to the split between Giganotosaurus and T-Rex as hunters. T-Rex had a bite force of around 12,800 pounds, the strongest of any land animal that ever lived. T-Rex bit down and everything inside its mouth was pulverized. Bones cracked like walnuts. Vertebrae came apart. It was designed to kill through sheer overwhelming pressure. Giganotosaurus was not built like that. Its bite force was significantly weaker, with estimates generally in the range of 3,000 to 5,000 pounds. That's still enormous by any modern standard, comparable to or above a large saltwater crocodile, but it's a fraction of what T-Rex was working with. So why is Giganotosaurus considered the scarier animal by many of the paleontologists who've studied both? Because Giganotosaurus wasn't trying to crush anything. It was trying to cut. The teeth tell the story. T-Rex teeth are thick, banana-shaped, built like railroad spikes. They're designed to survive impact with solid bone. Giganotosaurus teeth are thinner, longer, more blade-like. They're sharper on the edges. They're serrated in a way that suggests they were built for slicing muscle and severing arteries, not for bone-crushing bites. Its skull was lighter, more streamlined, built for slashing attacks rather than clamping down and holding on. Think of it this way: T-Rex fought like a hammer. Giganotosaurus fought like a knife, and it needed to, because of what it was hunting. Giganotosaurus lived in what is now Argentina about 98 to 97 million years ago, during the Late Cretaceous. That part of South America was not the dry, wind-scraped Patagonia you see in pictures today. It was a lush floodplain, warm and wet, cut through with rivers, dotted with tall conifers and early flowering plants. Herds of enormous herbivores moved through it. Not enormous the way an elephant is enormous. Enormous the way a 5-story apartment building is enormous. Because Giganotosaurus shared its ecosystem with Argentinosaurus, pronounced Argentinosaurus. And Argentinosaurus is the biggest animal that has ever walked on land that we know of. About 100 to 130 feet long, up to 100 tons. A single vertebra from its spine is bigger than an adult human. Its thigh bone alone was about 8 feet long, taller than an NBA player. You do not hunt something the size of a small building by biting through its skull. It doesn't have a vulnerable skull to bite through, not at its scale. So you slash, you go in fast, you open a wound, you back off, you let the animal bleed, and then you come back. Over minutes, over hours, however long it takes. That's what the anatomy of Giganotosaurus suggests it was doing. And if that's true, this predator wasn't just big. It was patient. It was calculating. It was the closest thing the Cretaceous had to a coordinated demolition crew, which brings up the question that's driven a decade of debate in paleontology. Was Giganotosaurus doing this alone, or was it doing this with company? For most of the 20th century, the assumption was that all large theropods, the 2-legged carnivorous dinosaurs, were solitary hunters. Ambush predators mostly, lone killers stalking through the underbrush. But starting in the 2000s, that assumption started to crack. Enter Rodolfo Coria, the same Argentinian paleontologist who described the first Giganotosaurus. In the late 1990s, his team found something in a nearby rock formation. It was a close relative called Mapusaurus, pronounced Ma-pu-saur-us. When they excavated the site, they didn't find one skeleton. They found bones from at least 7 individuals, ranging from juveniles to fully grown adults, all buried together in the same bed. One bone bed doesn't prove pack behavior. Animals can die together for lots of reasons. A drought concentrating them around a shrinking waterhole. A flood sweeping bodies into the same trap. A single mass event. But the pattern kept appearing. Multiple carcharodontosaur relatives buried in groups, mixed age classes. The kind of assemblage that in modern predators like lions would strongly suggest social hunting. The leading theory works like this. To take down a 100-ton sauropod, even a slow, older, sick one, a single 8-ton predator is running enormous risks. One well-placed tail whip and your ribs are gone. One misstep and a foot the size of a picnic table lands on your chest. A pack of Giganotosaurus coordinating even loosely changes the math. Multiple attack angles, multiple bleeding wounds, a prey animal that can only defend one flank at a time. Some paleontologists are cautious about this. The evidence for coordinated pack behavior in Giganotosaurus specifically is inference from close relatives, not direct proof, but the ecosystem it lived in almost demanded it. Argentinosaurus wasn't the only titanic sauropod down there. There were multiple species of massive plant eaters. Something had to be pushing them, and the only thing big enough, fast enough, and armed correctly enough was Giganotosaurus, possibly working in groups. Imagine not one Giganotosaurus, but several. moving through the trees, staying just downwind, waiting for the old bull at the back of the herd to fall behind. That's a scarier animal than T-Rex has ever been. Now let's talk about the discovery, because the story of how this creature entered the scientific record is almost as strange as the animal itself. Carolini spotted what he thought was a large bone eroding out of a hillside in 1993. He contacted the local museum. The bones went to Rodolfo Coria at the Museo Municipal Carmen Funes in Plaza Huincul, Argentina. Coria was a young paleontologist at the time. He'd been working on Patagonian dinosaurs. What Carolini had found was much bigger than anything the museum had seen. When the excavation was done, the team had recovered a substantial portion of a single skeleton, more than 50% by most counts. For any large theropod, that's an extraordinary amount. Most T-Rex skeletons in museums are cobbled together from multiple individuals. To have one animal, that complete, that big, sitting in the rock waiting to be found, was a scientific event on the level of finding Sioux in South Dakota 2 years earlier. Coria and his colleague Leonardo Salgado published the description in the journal Nature in 1995. And when the world read the paper, one number stood out: the skull, roughly 6 feet long, longer than the largest T-Rex skull ever measured, which topped out around 5 feet. The math from there was straightforward. If the skull is bigger and the body proportions are similar, the whole animal is bigger. The reaction in the paleontology community was mixed. Some researchers embraced it immediately. Others pushed back, arguing the size estimates were being pulled up by a single, unusually large specimen. That debate is still ongoing. Some studies suggest Giganotosaurus and T-Rex were roughly the same size on average, with the biggest individuals of each species overlapping. Others hold to the original estimates. What isn't debated is that this animal belongs in the same weight class as the largest land predators ever confirmed. And it wasn't alone at the top. South America during the Late Cretaceous was a continent full of giant theropods. Giganotosaurus was one of a family called the carcharodontosaurs, pronounced carcharodontosaurs, which means shark-toothed lizards. That family included Maposaurus, the pack hunter cousin. It included Tyrannotitan, pronounced Tyrannotitan, in a slightly earlier layer of rock. Across the ocean, in what is now North Africa, the same family produced Carcharodontosaurus itself, which may have been just as big. This was a global dynasty of shark-toothed apex predators, and they ruled the world before T-Rex was ever a thing. They were the top of the food chain for millions of years. T-Rex, when it finally arrived, was a latecomer, a completely different lineage of theropod, the tyrannosaurs, which evolved separately and only became giants near the end of the Cretaceous. By the time T-Rex was walking around Hell Creek in Montana, Giganotosaurus and its family had already been extinct for about 30 million years. The gap in time between Giganotosaurus and T-Rex is longer than the gap in time between T-Rex and you. When Giganotosaurus was hunting through Argentinian forests, T-Rex wasn't a species yet. It wasn't even a genus. Its ancestors were small, dog-sized predators nobody would have paid attention to. So why doesn't Mark know this name? Part of it is geography. Giganotosaurus fossils come out of Argentina. American media, American museums, and American paleontology tourism have been built around North American finds. T-Rex is American. Sioux is at the Field Museum in Chicago. Stan sold at auction in New York. Every kid in the country grows up with the Hell Creek Formation as the default backdrop for prehistoric imagination. Part of it is the movies. Jurassic Park came out in 1993, the same year the Giganotosaurus skeleton was found. The movie made T-Rex the villain. It took nearly 30 years and a sequel called Jurassic World Dominion for Giganotosaurus to get a starring role in that franchise. And even then, most viewers walked out of the theater not quite sure what they had just watched. Was that a T-Rex? A big T-Rex? Some new dinosaur? The name didn't stick. Part of it is just cultural momentum. T-Rex has had a century-long head start on being famous. Giganotosaurus has had about 30 years, most of it spent buried in scientific journals that Mark's never going to read. But the science is clear. In a straight comparison of size, weight, and hunting capability against animals in its own weight class, Giganotosaurus was every bit T-Rex's equal, and in several ways its superior. It was longer, it was probably faster relative to its size class. It was designed to hunt bigger prey, and it may have hunted in packs. If a modern human was dropped into Hell Creek 66 million years ago, they'd face one T-Rex, probably alone, hunting mostly by ambush. Terrifying but singular. If that same human was dropped into Patagonia 97 million years ago, they might face 3 or 4 Giganotosaurus, working together, moving through the forest with the coordination of a hunting party. There's no ambush, there's no getting away, there's just the sound of trees breaking behind you, and the realization that whichever direction you run, one of them is already there. Stand in that forest at dusk. The air is warm and heavy, thick with the smell of damp vegetation and something reptilian you can't quite place. The light is fading. Somewhere off to your left, a branch snaps. You turn. Nothing. You turn back and something enormous is standing in the trail where you were about to walk. 6-foot skull, blade teeth, eyes that have already decided what you are. You'd weigh the same in that forest as you do now. Gravity hasn't changed. You'd be running at maybe 15 miles per hour. Tops. Giganotosaurus would be running at more than that, gaining ground with every stride. The math is not on your side. It was never on your side. That's the world Argentinosaurus lived in. That's the pressure that produced the biggest herbivores in the history of land life. Sauropods didn't get huge for no reason. They got huge because something down there was killing them, and the only defense against a pack of 40-foot slashers was to grow past the point where slashing worked. The arms race between Giganotosaurus and Argentinosaurus is one of the most extreme predator-prey relationships this planet has ever produced. A 100-ton plant eater. A 9-ton meat eater with knives for teeth, working together, bleeding the giant to death over hours. That's not a fight T-Rex ever had. T-Rex hunted Triceratops. Triceratops was big, about the size of a large elephant. But it wasn't Argentinosaurus. Nothing in North America during T-Rex's time was Argentinosaurus. The prey animals in Hell Creek maxed out at around 4 to 8 tons for a hadrosaur, pronounced had-ro-saur, called Edmontosaurus. Argentinosaurus was more than 10 times that mass. The predator that solved that problem was Giganotosaurus, the predator that solved the biggest prey problem in the history of vertebrate life on land. That's the killer's resume. That's why the paleontologists who work on this animal talk about it with a specific kind of quiet respect. Not the fanboy energy that T-Rex gets. Something closer to the way people talk about great whites. Not, isn't it cool, but this thing killed with method. Giganotosaurus went extinct around 96 million years ago, along with most of its shark-toothed family. The reason is still being worked out. Some researchers point to changes in the sauropod populations they hunted. Others suggest ecological shifts that favored different kinds of predators. The carcharodontosaurs faded, and the tyrannosaurs, small and unimpressive at the time, slowly rose to take their place. By 66 million years ago, T-Rex was the face of the apex predator role. and Giganotosaurus had been forgotten for so long there was no one left to remember it. Then an auto mechanic walked down a hillside in 1993 and found a bone sticking out of the rock. We're still finding more. New skeletons of related species come out of South America and North Africa every few years. The picture keeps sharpening. The bite mechanics are being reanalyzed with better software. The pack behavior debate is getting new evidence with each dig season. In 20 years, the version of Giganotosaurus in museum halls may look meaningfully different from the version we have now, but the core is settled. This was a bigger predator than T-Rex. This was an older predator than T-Rex. This may have been a smarter, more social, more coordinated predator than T-Rex. The reason Mark doesn't know the name isn't because the animal wasn't scary enough. It's because history is written by whoever gets there first, and T-Rex got there first. In the fossil record, in the museums, in the movies, in the imagination of every American kid who ever wanted to be a paleontologist. There's a name Argentinosaurus never got to say out loud because sauropods didn't have language and because it was too busy trying to stay alive. But if you translated the fear that shaped its evolution, if you took the pressure that made it grow to the size of a 5-story building and put it into a single word, that word wouldn't be tyrannosaur. It would be Giganotosaurus. The dinosaurs you learned about as a kid are not the whole story. The scariest predator that ever walked the earth may not be the one on the movie poster. It may be waiting in a Patagonian hillside, in bones that haven't been dug up yet, in a name that most of the world still hasn't learned to say. Deep time keeps its receipts. Whatever we think we know about who ruled this planet, the rocks are still holding surprises. The story is still being written, and every once in a while, an amateur fossil hunter walking a dry riverbed on a weekend finds a bone, and the top of the food chain gets a new name. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.